I'm Cody Green, and I'm 22, and I was born and raised in Phoenix City. I was born with a cleft palate. I was born failure to thrive. And a cleft palate, if any of you don't know what that is, it's a hole in the roof of my mouth which causes a speech impediment. So, and I thank God so much I was adopted because my birth mother couldn't easily aborted me because, she couldn't take care of me, so that could have been the easy way out. But thankfully, I was adopted, and the parents who received me are so loving, and they're great Christian people, so I thank God that He put me in their lives. I was also adopted because my birth mother, she couldn't really provide for me. She couldn't pay for any of the surgeries I needed to have. So I'm thankful for the parents that God did give me because they were able to provide for me. They were able to pay for my surgeries. And I had, growing up, I had about 15 surgeries. And at times, that was really hard for me. And I didn't really acknowledge God was with me then, but now I do acknowledge that God was with me even then. Yeah, so there would be times too where, going through life with a speech impediment, I was so afraid to even speak at times because sometimes people just want to understand me, so I'd get a little upset, a little sad about that. And so I had to deal with that most of my whole entire life too. I've always had a hard time fitting in. I've always had a hard time being accepted by other people. I was feeling down about myself a lot, insecure and just pitiful. So with that, I was also going to a church. I wasn't, I said I was a Christian, but I wasn't really living it. So I was pretty much homeschooled my whole life, but I did go to kindergarten for a while. And with that, I also had a hard time focusing on what I was supposed to do. I was hyperactive, moving around my seat all the time. So the teacher I had, she even put me in my own little corner. So I had to go through that, and I was also sad about that because I wanted to be with the other kids. So I had to deal with that. And also while homeschooling, that was pretty good for me because I was able to just be with my parents. I was able to actually focus on what I was supposed to do with their help. And so I'm very thankful for them in that kind of way too, for teaching me. And so during my freshman year, I wanted to try out public school for a while. So I ended up going to public school for a little bit during my freshman year. And for a while, I thought that was actually going pretty good for me. But then I started getting picked on a little bit. People didn't really understand what I said at times, so I feel sad about that. And then also I was hanging out with the wrong people there too, and they were the Gothic people. And they were really the only ones who accepted me at that school, so that's why I started hanging out with them more. And so as I started doing that, I started wearing black. I started trying to be a little Gothic. And so there was a time where I even thought about committing suicide. So one time I tied my belt on the ceiling fan, and I was sitting there thinking about doing it. But then I heard this small voice tell me, "Don't do that." So I ended up not doing that. I'm so thankful I did not. That would have been a disaster. So then after all the depression, my parents realized I had to become homeschooled again. That was better for me. So with that, I got involved in the homeschool group, and I met all kinds of new friends, and I would be hanging out with them all the time as much as I could, because they also accepted me. So I was so thankful for that. We always went out to eat at times. We went on social events, and during that time I was living right. I was actually trying to live for God. But really, at the same time, I was still doing things I shouldn't be doing. Like I even had a problem with lust. Oh yeah, and then eventually as I kept living in sin, with lust and everything, and I started hanging out with the wrong people when I was in the homeschool group. So that eventually led me to separate myself from the group I was in. And so I started hanging out with the wrong people more and more, and that just led me down a destructive path. And, I was embarrassed to be around the friends I made that were in that group. And so I stopped showing up to events. I stopped showing up to hang out, and I was just doing my own thing. I was living in depression. I was living in insecurity. That was just a dark time of my life. I started experimenting with drugs, and so I started smoking weed, and that was the first thing I tried, which really, it is a gateway drug, and even drinking, just trying to fit in, but with the wrong people. A few months later, after I turned 18, I met my birth mother, and how I found her was through Facebook, and turns out every birthday she would write me a happy birthday post on Facebook. And so, I searched her name, and that's how I found her, through that. And after meeting her, I also met who I thought was my birth father. Again, he looked like me, but I wasn't really sure. And for a while, it was doing good. I got to know them. I got to know what they were doing. I got to know about their past life. And so during that time, it was just really good getting to know them and, getting to know where I came from. And so, down the road, as I got to know them more and more, I found out they had a drug habit. And so I would, and I already had a drug habit during that time. They just didn't really know about it. So I brought up the fact that I was also struggling with this and doing this. And so, I started doing drugs with them. I started hanging out with them more and more. Yeah, and, when I was 19, I was in a relationship, and, I was living in sin, things I shouldn't be doing. And, so yeah, after that ended, I fell in deep depression. And during that time, I was clean for a while. And so when we broke up, that really hurt me. And so I decided to go back to doing drugs. I started hanging out with some other guys. Then I started doing meth. And I was even trying other things like Xanax, cocaine. One time I went back home and I was high. My parents knew I was already doing things before that time, but during this time it was very obvious because I was just so temperamental. And so they searched the bag I had, they found what I had, and they told me I had two options. I could either stop doing this at their house, or I could move out and go somewhere else. And so I was already embarrassed, I was already insecure about it, and I wanted to keep doing it because I thought at the time it was fun. So that happened, and I left the house, and I ended up staying at the drug house. I would watch people come in and out, and that was scary at times because I wasn't used to that, knowing where I came from. Met this one guy, him and I became friends, and turns out he was selling drugs. So I'll be riding with him. We would go from house to house to sell what we had, and even buy what they had. And one night we pulled up at this one house, and turns out it was a setup. So as we were leaving, the cops were telling us, and then all of a sudden they turned on their lights, and the high-speed chase broke out. And I was in the back of the truck. He was driving my truck, and we ended up in the church lawn. And he jumped out of my truck as it was still moving, and I was in the back seat. And he ditched me. He ran off into the woods. He got away, and then the cops came to get me out of the truck. And when they got me out, they put me in the back of their cop car, and then they told me to get out for a minute because they wanted to talk to me. So they impounded my truck, and I had to walk home all throughout the night until the morning. And so I got to my parents' house, and surprisingly, and this is the grace they showed me, they actually went to the impound. They got my truck back. And after that, for a while, I was doing good. I was clean. I even went on a small mission trip with my parents. And that time was good. But down the road, I became friends with this other guy, and turns out he was involved in some bad things. He was also doing drugs, the whole crap. So I started doing drugs with him. I started getting more involved into it again. And so one night I was riding with my friend. He was driving, and he wasn't doing drugs or anything, but I was at the time. And so the drugs I had were in the pocket of the truck. And I also had alcohol in my lap. And so we saw the cops come by in the truck, and he was speeding. So, of course, they turned around, they turned their lights on, and we got pulled over. So the cop came around to the truck, got the driver out, and then he came on my side, got me out, and they pulled all the alcohol out. And they found the drugs I had in the pocket of the truck, and the cop was like, "What is this doing back here?" So, I was honest with him. I told him I messed up. I was clean for a while, and I don't know what possessed me to do this. But yeah, those are mine, because I didn't want to get my friend in trouble. So again, they told me I had two options. I could either go to jail with them that night, or I could go to rehab centers that they recommended, and they would just check up on me without a record. So I decided to choose rehab for 9 months, and it was outpatient therapy. So during the 9 months, I actually grew closer to Christ. I stopped doing what I was doing. I stopped hanging out with the friends I was hanging out with. And I don't know, my life just changed because of God's grace. During rehab, it turns out the counselor I had, she was actually a Christian lady. So, with that, she was a good encouragement to have. But the thing that really changed me the most, who really changed me the most was actually God himself. Because, I recognized his grace at that time in my life where I had to make a choice. It was either, leave my sin behind me or keep living a life in sin. I had to make that choice. And I just know that was God's grace, that he actually gave me a choice to make. So I thank God for that. And, it was hard at times. I even had my parents to help me out too. And they were really loving. They've always been there for me, even during this time of my life. But I thank God so much for that. And with that, my friend Diver's mother, she gave me a card for Agents for Christ. And for a while, I was a little bit hesitant about going because, I thought, why wouldn't God use me as something like this after what I came from? So during that time, I prayed about it. I was just asking God, should I really do this? Should I really do this for you? And during that time, he confirmed it to me that yes, you need to go and do it, no matter what you've been through. So after he put that in my heart, I decided to call Dave. He's the ministry leader at the 10th Hour Project. And sure enough, a few months later, I ended up going to the 10th Hour Project. And the 10th Hour Project, it's an 8-month discipleship program. And 5 months we spend, being discipled. We have an Old Testament survey, a New Testament survey, and we do outreach every Saturday at the market to just evangelize and to try to reach people. We even went on 2 tours, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. And those tours, we would go from church to church, sharing an evangelism class and even our testimonies. I remember this one time I was at this church at Calvary Chapel, Seneca Falls, and earlier that day I shared my testimony about how I was born with a speech impediment and how I was adopted. And later on that day, after the evening church service, a father came up to me. He told me, that's crazy you mentioned that in your testimony because my daughter was also born with a speech impediment and she was also adopted. So from right then, I finally realized how God could use me and how he has been using me. And then we went to Uganda for about 3 months. And in Uganda, we were able to do discipleship. So, the pastor there, he gave a kids to each of the student in the term. And so we got to disciple, 2 kids or maybe 3 or 4. So I had 2 kids with me and I got to pour into their lives. I got to disciple them, teach them in the way they should go. And so I got to do that, and we got to visit people every Tuesday. There would be unbelievers or believers from the church or believers from, other churches around, like the Church of Uganda. And so we got to visit them. And then Thursday, we also went on an outreach. And the outreaches it was a great opportunity to be able to evangelize the people in the village, to just be able to love with those people, to pray for those people, and to just be there for those people. Because that's what God calls us to go out and make disciples. So that's what we should do as Christians. And so we did that. And one of the outreach, I ended up sharing my testimony about how God saved me from drugs and how I never would have thought I would have ended up in Uganda. So man, that's just a blessing itself. And so after I shared my testimony, many people came up for prayer. A few lives were changed. And it was such a blessing. And one of the problems in Uganda is many people think being good is what's going to get you to heaven. But no, that's not the thing, because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And being good is not going to get us to heaven. What is going to get us to heaven is having faith in Jesus, knowing that His grace is sufficient. And so we had to explain that to many of the people there, because they were just, they were taught prosperity, they were taught the social gospel. So we had to share the true gospel to those people. And we had chapel every morning. And I thank God for those days, because I just remember standing there in worship, hearing all the other kids in the chapel just singing their hearts out. And that really just blessed my heart so much to hear all those young kids singing like that. And I thank God for giving me that opportunity. And that's something I'll always remember from Uganda. But I thank God for each and every one of those kids. I thank God for Pastor Bill and his wife, Danielle. And I thank Him for what He's doing in Uganda and at Calvary Chapel, Oshunga. Yeah, I really made a family with the 10th Hour Project. And I thank God for each and every one of them and how they poured into my life, how they edified me, how they built me up. And man, God really blessed me with some great people, and I thank God for that. A verse that stood out to me while I was in Uganda, because I was thinking about my past sins. But anyway, it's Luke 20:38. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living, because all are living to Him. So with that said, that just reminded me that my past sins, they are dead. What I've done in the past is dead. And I am alive because Christ is alive. And why? Because He is the God of the living, not the God of the dead. And another verse that really spoke to me during the 10th Hour Project, Exodus 4:10-12. And this is the Lord talking to Moses. And Moses replied to the Lord, "Please, Lord, I've never been eloquent either in the past or recently or since you have been speaking to your servant, because my mouth and my tongue are sluggish." The Lord said to him, "Who placed a mouth on humans? Who makes a person mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say." And throughout all the program, these verses really stood out to me, because if God could use Moses when Moses had a speech impediment, a disability, God can use me, even if I have a speech impediment. And just anyone that struggles with a disability, know that God can use you to glorify His kingdom, to reach other people. And when I first got back to the States, I was so excited to see my parents, because, I really did miss them. And I was just so excited to see what God was going to do next in and through our lives. And so, they saw the change in me, and they were just so proud of me. Yeah. Love you, man.
Good?
Yeah, I love you, bro. It was more difficult than... I came to that place of finding true contentment in Christ, knowing that He has me, knowing that, He's there for me, and knowing that all I have to trust is Him. And because I lived my whole life in insecurity, in thinking I didn't have a purpose, But now I know that God has given me a purpose, and that's to serve Him and to do what He wants me to do. And man, there's so much freedom in knowing that. There's so much freedom in Christ. And I would like all of you to experience that freedom. And I hope you get a chance to do that someday.